land tussle between the Lagos State government and a group of residents in a highbrow Shangisha Magodo has remained on the front pages of major newspapers across Nigeria these past few days. To quell the tension, Lagos State government embarked on a number of interventions, including a promise to compensate the aggrieved landlords with more than 500 plots of land. The landlords had insisted on the implementation of a 2012 judgment delivered by the Nigerian Supreme Court, a case that started in 1988, in which they allege that the state government forcefully took parcels of land belonging to the Association for Magodo Phase 2 Estate.
After the near breakdown of law and order in Magodo Estate, occasioned by the attempt to enforce a Supreme Court ruling secured by the Shangisha Landlords Association over the estate land dispute, parties in the matter are back on the discussion table. The dialogue followed the promise by the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu when he visited the Magodo Phase 2 Estate, where tension had escalated on Tuesday with the continued enforcement of the court ruling by the agents of the judgment creditors backed by armed police personnel. Wednesday's meeting, held behind closed doors, had in attendance the leader of the Shangisha Landlords Association, the government team, and the Magodo Residents Association, with the governor presiding. At the end of the over 2-hour deliberations, Mr. Sanwo-Olu addressed journalists on some of the resolutions.
Immediately, meaning on Friday, they will be working with all of the stakeholders at identifying available plots of land around the Shangisha area. Drones will be flown, surveys will be made, and available plots will be identified. In the event that there are identified plots, allocations will be made timely, and what additional plots, if you don't have the right number there, will also be identified at mutually agreeable location with the other stakeholders, and the government will also review the list of all of the allotees, 549 of them, and we will ensure in no distant future allocations and plots of land will be given to them, once the full determination of all the areas have been fashioned out, and we'll all be reporting and working transparently, to ensure that fairness, equity, justice is displayed out, and we ensure at the end of the day that we have a win-win situation.
The leader of the Shangisha Landlords Association is also happy that dialogue has been opened in a bid to find a permanent solution to the crisis, although there are specific demands that they seek.
Now, could this gesture be a permanent solution to the crisis? Since the onset of this crisis, a plethora of legal interpretations have been offered by legal experts and lawyers alike. However, there is a growing view that the extant Supreme Court verdict has not been interpreted well enough. Well, for greater focus on this matter, we are now being joined by a very senior member of the Nigerian Bar, Chief Robert Clark, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Welcome to the morning show and good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, as you heard in my introduction, since the onset of this crisis, a plethora of legal interpretations have been offered by legal experts and lawyers. Well, the Supreme Court decision was delivered on February 10th, 2012. It had mandated the Lagos State government to give back 549 plots to the original landowners of the area, fraudulently, like the Supreme judgment claims, was acquired over 38 years ago. Now, can you help us shed more light or interpret the Supreme Court verdict?
You see, in the Constitution of Nigeria, the Supreme Court judgment has been clearly stated, has to be enforced anywhere in Nigeria by any court in any state. Therefore, it is of paramount importance to note that when a Supreme Court judgment is given, and it is released to the state involved, it is incumbent on the state immediately to enforce that judgment, because neither the Supreme Court, nor the Court of Appeal, nor the Federal High Court has any power to execute any judgment of its own, because enforcement of judgment rules are basically, primarily, that of the state. You have the sheriff and civil processes laws, which enables the Lagos state government or any other state from where a judgment emanates on appeal to the Supreme Court to be the enforcement power to enforce the judgment of the Supreme Court. So immediately the Supreme Court gave that judgment in 2012. It was incumbent on Lagos state government through its sheriffs and civil processes laws and through the police and sheriffs to take over and enforce the judgment. So there was no problem at all anywhere. The problem, I am bold enough to say, lies with the Lagos state. Now, in 2002, when that judgment was appealed, the presiding judge in the Lagos circuit of the Court of Appeal was my good friend Ogutade, who is a Lagos indigene. He gave judgment and confirmed that the owners should have possession of the residue of the land that has been, taken off from them. So it is quite clear that Lagos State has been aware that this judgment has been coming on right from 2002 from appeal. Now, very interesting thing, to us lawyers, facts are very sacred. To enable a lawyer to determine a principle of law, the facts must be clear to him. If your facts are wrong, you will never get it right. Now, what are the facts in this case? In 2012, when the indigents won this case, they came to a Lagos High Court to register the judgment and enforce the judgment. I believe my good Aburo then, Atilade, gave them the order that they could go and enforce the judgment. Surprisingly, I am not saying Lagos state government knew about it. Another court in Lagos, I think it was Justice Adebi, now set aside the order of Atilade, therefore making the judgment of the Supreme Court unenforceable, because the only enforceable power to do it is the Lagos judiciary. Therefore, these facts must be known to you and I. When the Lagos state government decided to set aside the order of Atilade, was it flouting the Constitution? Was it doing it deliberately? One has to ask oneself. Another question that came out again in this saga, I observed the governor telling the superintendent of police or whichever police officer was there that he was giving him instructions as the chief security officer, as the chief security of the state, to clear his police officers away from the scene. Now, it is very funny. 3 or 4 days before that statement, I think Channels Television, or I don't know which television agency, was talking to the president about a state police. And the president was very clear that he was not going to go for state police. But you can see what has happened 3 days thereafter. You can see that if there was a state police, in this case as it is, there is a clear violation of of the judgment of the Supreme Court, which has constitutional backing. The Lagos State Police, who are the enforcement officers, have been asked by the court not to obey the judgment. Now, after almost 10 years, there is a judgment that is yet to be fulfilled. You ask yourself, is it a deliberate act of the Lagos State government not to comply with the judgment of the Supreme Court? Is it the rascality of certain elements within the judiciary in Lagos State that is hindering the acceptability of the judgment of the Supreme Court? These are questions to be asked. Now, these people, having gone twice to court and finding that there is no way out for them, had to write a petition. They had to write a petition to the Attorney General of the Federation. Now, some lawyers might say that the Attorney General of the Federation has no power under the law to enforce the judgment of the Supreme Court. Okay, let us agree that the enforcement of judgments are done by the state sheriffs. However, what is the damage, one, to the Constitution that the order of the Supreme Court is not being adhered to? What is the damage to the litigants who have won a judgment for 10 years? Now, the Attorney General has told the world that he wrote a letter to the government of Lagos State telling them that this is a petition I have received. What are you doing about the petition? The Attorney General has to ensure that the Constitution of Nigeria is maintained by anybody, wherever in Nigeria. Therefore, he has the right to have written to the Lagos State government to ask the Lagos State government to ensure that they comply with the order. According to what we have heard and according to what we have seen, there were almost 6 weeks that this letter was written, and Lagos State did nothing. Now, the question arises. The question of whether police should have a police state and a federal state has now come out into the public. We have now seen that the Lagos State, who has the monopoly of power to enable a judgment of the Supreme Court to be carried out, is failing in its duty to do so. Would you and I allow the failure of the police to carry out its official functions in relation to a judgment of the apex court? Do we allow it to continue? That is the question, Chief, for you and I to decide.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief, if I may. Thanks for those clarifications and the background information. But then please kindly explain to us from the point of law and from the point of reality how this sort of enforcement can work, how the writ of possession could have worked, given the fact that within the time that all these have been going back and forth in the court, fortunately or unfortunately, Lagos State government has sold plots of land to individuals who have, developed. I mean, the whole place is virtually built up, and people have CFOs from the government. Now, if that sort of a judgment is going to be enforced, in what manner do you think that will have happened, given the fact that the 549 plots of land that the Supreme Court affirmed ought to have been reserved for the owners are no longer there? And I'm aware from what those who are conversant with this matter are saying that there have been discussions back and forth between the judgment creditors and the Lagos State government as to what will serve as adequate compensation. Granted that has not happened, but then using the office of the Inspector General of Police and the Attorney General of the Federation to send a detachment of police officers to, if you like, forcefully take over or bulldoze down people's houses. Will two wrongs make a right in this matter, given what has happened with NSAS? If one person had been shot or died in that instance last week, don't you think that the whole matter will have gotten worse, and that will not be the intendment of the Supreme Court judgment?
Okay, let me start from the beginning. When a state government compulsorily acquires property from indigents, it must be solely and only for public purpose. Where the government finds after the acquisition that after the purpose for which it has acquired, there still remains land, it is incumbent on the government under the law to return the land to the indigents. The government has no power, no legal right, after having acquired properties and the remainder of the properties not having been returned to the indigents, to start selling such properties to third parties and giving such owners certificates of occupancy. It is illegal, it is wrong, and the Lagos state government has done a wrong thing. I am not accusing the present Sanwo-Olu government, because this thing happened during the military regime.
Yes.
And you know what we were passing through then. But the law is clear. Once there's a remainder of acquired properties, the government returns the remainder to the indigents, not to sell to third parties. And I believe one of the complaints of the indigents now is that instead of returning to them, they started selling to Lagos state official, high-profile people, government, and all these things, which in law. So, ab initio from the beginning, the government was wrong to have sold, and the government was wrong to have given out certificate of occupancy. That answers your question. Secondly, only state governments from where a suit originates from is empowered under the Sheriffs and Civil Processes Law to ensure that judgments are, put into action. For instance, in Lagos State, any judgment of Lagos government, Lagos judiciary, must, be implemented first by the CJ or the presiding judge or whoever judge to give out an order to the Sheriffs and Processes Department to enforce the judgment. They are the only people under the law, under the Constitution we now carry on, can enforce judgment. Judgment cannot be enforced by the Supreme Court. Judgment cannot be enforced by the Court of Appeal. Even the Federal High Court uses the enforcement agencies of the state in which they are operating. Therefore, in law, if you want to know, the Supreme Court has no power to enforce. It's only the state government through the Sheriff's Department that can enforce. However, in the circumstances in which we have found ourselves, if the duty imposed by law on a person to perform a certain duty is disregarded, if a duty imposed by law to an organization to act within certain specific purposes does not do it, the law will not allow a vacuum to occur, because in the circumstances of this nature, a vacuum creates a disrespect to the judgment of the Supreme Court. Is that what you and I are looking for in Nigeria, where a judgment of the Supreme Court will be carelessly thrown aside by a government for one reason or the other? That creates chaos more than even the government, federal government sending its own police. Because failure to give order to a judgment of the Supreme Court carries a lot of, chaos, if not adhered to. So to answer your second question, where the Lagos State government uses its own agency by the court setting aside, one court setting aside the order of possession, has created a situation of chaos. So they started it. Now, can the Attorney General of the Federation, who is a custodian, who is the chief legal officer of the federal government, to whom only the Supreme Court can rely to enforce many things on its behalf, can he just sit by and find that a state government is flouting the Constitution in a manner that may cause chaos and disrespect? That is another question to be. So you have to weigh the two sides.
Right.
The Lagos State government has created a chaotic. Should it be allowed by the police? Should it be allowed by the Attorney General? We all know that two wrongs don't make a right. If the Attorney General did not do what he did, there will have been chaos. These people will carry machete, carry anything to recover their properties. More so when they have a Supreme Court judgment behind them. So in law, even though the Supreme Court cannot enforce its own judgment, in the interest of justice, because justice is paramount to everything we do in this country, in the interest of justice, the Attorney General had a right to protect not only the Supreme Court, but the rights of its citizens, to direct the Lagos State government to do what it has to do under the law, which it then refused to do. From what we know, they were given due notice, about 15 days notice, that there's a petition from these people. Do something about it. It is not an ordinary petition. It is a judgment of the Supreme Court. Therefore, your question is that whether two wrongs make a right, or whether the Attorney General has the power to send to the police, has to be weighed against the injustice to the people who have won a judgment for 10 years and have not got to reap their judgment, and the right of the government. During the period of time in Nigeria, we were talking of doctrine of, what do you call it? A doctrine of necessity. We don't have any doctrine of necessity in Nigerian constitution. I opposed it then. The Nigerian constitution does not have a vacuum. It is only where there is a vacuum that you can come to the aid by justice, by the doctrine of. It is clear in our constitution that the judgment of the Supreme Court must, it's mandatory, must be obeyed by any government. Therefore, the failure of Lagos State to give effect for 10 years the judgment of the Supreme Court is a failure on their part, and they are the people who are raising all this dust.
All right. Chief Clerk. Now, the push on restructuring now has taken center stage after the altercation between the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu and that CSP amid this whole controversy. Now, what is your take on President Buhari shutting down the call for state police, which he did during his interview with Channels TV? He described it as noise. Do you think the president is right? Some lawyers have argued that governors may begin to use state police as private militia, as we may have witnessed in this case.
Can you hear me? Let me be clear on this. I'm not hearing you very well.
Sure, I can rephrase. Right, I can.
From the little intelligence, sure. I can. Hello?
I could rephrase my question. I was just.
My earphone is not working.
Sure. I was asking about the push for restructuring at this point. I mean, the call also for state police, the altercation between the Lagos State governor and that CSP amid this whole controversy. What is your take on President Buhari shutting down the call for state police?
Well, everybody has a right to his opinion in Nigeria. President Buhari, whatever he says as Mr. President, he says it as Mr. President. because he cannot change the constitution on his own part. Now, what you and I should think about now is this. This issue has raised the question of local police for states. Now, can you imagine if the police is a state police, like in Lagos, and they have done what they did now by flouting the order of the Supreme Court? Do you think it's a good omen for this country when the Supreme Court, that has no enforcement power, gives a judgment which the Constitution says the states must obey, and because the police are with the control of the states, they refuse to do it? It will cause chaos. This gives more argument to people that there should be no state police.
Right.
Because we feel that the governors will misuse, and this is exactly what is happening. The governors, through the judiciary in Lagos State, are misusing their powers to ignore the judgment of the Supreme Court because they hold the police, the power of the police, in their state. So it's a good argument for those who are saying, don't give state police power, because they will misuse it. And we are seeing what is happening. So it depends on which divide you are. It depends on which divide you are. That's my take.
All right, Chief, thanks. Before we round off, because of time, I'd like to circle back to the issue of the specific Magodo thing. I heard clearly what you said about the intervention of the Attorney General, but then a lot of people, including many eminent lawyers, have said that that was a selective intervention. We know, and lawyers have said so, that there are so many petitions waiting on the desk of Malami, waiting for his attention on landed matters in Lagos and elsewhere. Court judgment, Supreme Court judgment, involving the federal government, involving the police, involving the army. But the Attorney General has not done anything about it. People are saying, could this be about certain promises made to certain people, which is why the interest over Magodo is so key. But I don't want to belabor that part. I am interested in what will be your advice as to the intervention of the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, because he actually succeeded in bringing down tension much more than what the Attorney General did, because that will have aggravated chaos. Now he has promised that a committee will be in place. They will fly drones to see if there are lands that could be allocated over there. If they're not enough, he has promised that elsewhere will be looked at. And we heard what Chief Adebayo Adeiga also said, that yes, give us some land and then put the others to financial compensation. Do you think that that will sort all these issues, given the fact that even Chief Adeiga himself, who is the chairman of the Shangisha Landlord Association, does not seem to have the full support of all the judgment creditors? Many of them are comfortable with the compensation that Lagos State government is offering. Do you think that what has now happened will put an end permanently to this imbroglio?
Look, let us be honest. As I said, before any good lawyer can make any comments on a point of law, he must have his facts clear. We lawyers, facts are the cornerstone of our profession. If you get the facts wrong, you will never get the law right. So, with due respect to my colleagues, you are claiming that the Attorney General did this, he has no power, I have said it in the beginning, that the situation we have found ourselves is not who has the power to implement the law of the land, especially the judgment of the Supreme Court. The Attorney General does not have the power, I said so. But can you say what he did was wrong to ensure that the Constitution is maintained? When the Lagos State government, through its agency, the courts, did not execute a judgment of the Supreme Court, and the Attorney General, now not that he decided to do so, wrote to the state government to say, look, you are flouting the Constitution. So which is better? Is it the flouting of the Constitution or the aiding of the non-flouting of the Constitution? The facts are clear. I don't mind whatever any other lawyer says. What I'm saying is that land matters belong to the state. And the Attorney General of the Federation has no power to meddle into. But the facts are different here. The facts here are that the Lagos state government has refused to use its agency to ensure that the judgment of the Supreme Court is maintained. That is the point. It is not whether the Attorney General has power to come to Lagos. No. In this issue, the facts are that Supreme Court has made a judgment. A particular state is refusing to carry out the judgment. What do you want the Attorney General to do? Should he sit down? There will be chaos. Some of these people, when this case started in 1986, most of them are dead now. What is justice to them? Is it the power of the Attorney General or the recalcitrant nature of Lagos State? Is that justice to these people? When almost 80% of the people who went to court are dead. Look, don't let us look at things from very parochial angles. I know all these lawyers. They are good lawyers. But the circumstance that made the Attorney General to come to Lagos is a circumstance created by Lagos state government against the Constitution. So what is their quarrel if he comes now? Has he ever come here before? I am not holding brief for the Attorney General. He will be stupid tomorrow to come to Lagos without any reason and say, I want to do something about land.
All right, sir.
But please, for God's sake, let us look at facts. As what happened in Lagos for 10 good years, where a judgment is granted by the Supreme Court, and yet a government refuses to carry it out, using its own agency. So if you had given them police power, nothing will happen. It's because the police are not under Lagos State that the Attorney General has been able to do what it has done, to maintain order. Immediately they came in. Has order not now been maintained?
Yes.
Has Sanwo-Olu not quickly gone to realizing he has no power over the police?
Right.
Has he not called a meeting? Has he not given out now properties to these people? What has Lagos State been looking at for 10 years? Please.
Chief Clerk would like
give me
to...
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We would
Thank
like
you, Chief.
we would like to thank you.
What?
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We would like to thank you very much, Chief Robert Clark, for joining us on the morning show this morning.